We'll get started. Good afternoon. Thank you for participating in today's session on the signs discussion paper. I'm Olivia Balone, the Director for the Zoning Bylaw Renewal Initiative, and I will be your moderator for this session. Here with me today are members of the Zoning Bylaw team and the author of this discussion paper. We have Senior Planner Christian Lee, as well as Stephen Cook, Planner for the team. We also have Felipe Canavera, who will be assisting us with the technology for this session. So before we get started, I'd like to ask you to keep your microphone muted and your cameras off. At the end of the presentation, we'll be able to answer some questions, or if you have some commentary or just want to provide us some feedback, that would be great. We ask that all questions be entered into the comment box. If you're unable to put your questions in the comment box, so for example, you've called into the session, I will also do a call out for any questions. I'd also like to note that we are recording this session and it will be shared publicly for those who are unable to attend today. So we begin all of our meetings and information sessions by acknowledging the traditional land on which we are gathered here today, which is the territory of the Treaty 6 First Nations and the Métis Nation of Alberta Zone 4. I would like to acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries. It is a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share Edmonton as home. This acknowledgement is significant to the Zoning Bylaw Renewal for a number of reasons. We all share this land. We owe our presence here in the city's vitality and very existence to the land itself and the cultures that help build the city. Planning and zoning are really about land. Land is used for many things and it is tied to the practice of culture. And we also want the new zoning bylaw to address any regulations that may be discriminatory or offensive to First Nations, Indigenous, and Inuit Edmontonians. Together, we call upon our collective honor, traditions, and spirits to work in building a great city for today and for our future generations. So just before we get started with the agenda and the presentation, I wanted to just let you know at a high level a little bit more information about the initiative. So the Zoning Bylaw Renewal Initiative is a comprehensive overhaul of our current zoning bylaw. It includes rethinking how, what, and why the city regulates in terms of zoning and land development. The initiative is split into 4 projects. First of all, we've got a new zoning bylaw. So this is not amending our current zoning bylaw, but this is actually creating a brand new zoning bylaw. We are going to be rezoning the city. So as soon as we change zones, delete zones, change development rates, we actually need to rezone the entire city. Technology is about getting a new technological management system for the zoning bylaw. So this is where, for most of you that are probably on this call, how you access the bylaw online. So we're looking for a new system there. And also this includes improving our customer experience with the zoning bylaw and our planning and development services. And then implementation is about that change management piece. As soon as we go to new technology and a new zoning bylaw, we need to focus on a smooth transition to the new zoning bylaw. So these are things, activities, tasks that we need to do internally, but also working with our customers and Edmontonians who work with the zoning bylaw quite regularly. We are in phase 1 right now, which is research and foundations, and this phase ends at the end of January. And we've been working actively on all these different four projects. Probably most of you, though, have been interacting with our discussion papers. And we are just in the final stage of our discussion paper engagement. We've released 12 discussion papers. We had 3 batches, and our final batch was released on October 19th. And stakeholders have until November 13th to review them and provide feedback through our Engage Edmonton platform. The discussion papers are our preliminary thinking about the regulatory framework, and they're really just intended to spark a discussion, generate discussion, and this is our opportunity to get some feedback, get some comments on our. Stephen, you're next up here.
Thanks, Olivia. So today's presentation provides a high-level overview on the proposed sign regulation approach for the new zoning bylaw and also provides an opportunity for you to provide your input on its direction at the end of this session. Topics that will be discussed include the background of the sign review project, information about the city's new sign design guidelines, which are currently under development, current issues and how to address them through the proposed regulation approach. Lastly, we'll take some time to answer your questions you have to help refine this approach. It's important to note that this presentation provides an initial high-level overview of a simplified approach to sign regulation in Edmonton. This presentation will not cover specific regulations, as that will be further reviewed and refined after more stakeholder engagement at the end of the next phase of the renewal, which includes actual drafting of the regulations, as well as further development of the sign design guidelines. I'll now provide a little background to how sign regulations fit into the overall approach of the Zoning Bylaw Renewal Initiative. So the Zoning Bylaw Renewal will incorporate the remaining phases of the sign review project. This includes reviewing and revising sign regulations while the sign design guidelines are drafted concurrently with the regulations. In keeping with the goals for simplification of digital sign regulations completed in phase 1 of the sign review in 2018, remaining sign types and regulations will be reviewed as part of the zoning bylaw renewal work. It is anticipated that the new zoning bylaw will be approved in 2022. I'll now pass it over to Christian to speak to the sign design guidelines.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christian. I was introduced earlier, but just another role that I also play here at the city is I lead the urban design unit. And so for the folks that have been participating in the sign design guidelines, I understand it has been quite some time since we provided an update. And so, and given the work we are doing now with the actual zoning regs within the next phase upcoming, I felt it was about time we provided more information on the actual guidelines. So we should start off with what the design guidelines are not. Firstly, they are not going to be enforceable regulations. The guidelines are not a bylaw that permits would be reviewed against. And secondly, they're not intended to regulate or inhibit creativity in the content of signs. Okay, so then what are they supposed to do? Sign design guidelines are meant to inform the design and approval of meaningful, high-quality signs that positively contribute to our city as a whole. They apply to all signs throughout the city, in our neighborhoods, our parks, our streets, on our buildings, and beyond. They are designed to balance community values with business needs, practices, and expectations while minimizing negative impacts. And they are being designed to include a number of images and drawings to provide clarity and ease of use. The guidelines feature 2 parts. Part 1 covers design intent, and Part 2 deals with practice. So Part 1, design intent provides 4 design intents to determine the style, size, location, and overall look and feel of the sign to be included within our city. First off, quality. Quality considers materials being used for all parts of a sign, including support structures. Second, integrated. Integration considers how signs can reflect the character, design, or heritage of a building or site. Visual. Visual considers how signs can be concise and assist in minimizing visual clutter. And safe. Safety is really important here. Safety considers how signs should not negatively impact safety, create confusion, or obscuring sightlines. Part 2, practice. Practice provides information on the sign forms. Their location and specific details on various types of signs can be considered. Firstly, sign form and location. This part discusses where signs are permitted either on a building, projecting from a building, or on a property. Secondly, sign functions. Discusses the function of signs. Are they for identification? Are they there for site-related advertising, third-party advertising, wayfinding, or temporary? And thirdly, specific sign type criteria. This part discusses a list of all the various sign types that can be considered. In terms of next steps, and I'm sure many of you would be interested in knowing what we're going to do and when you'll get an actual draft to be able to look at and examine. So here's a quick timeline. We expect a draft of the design guidelines to be available for public viewing before the end of the year, hoping things go according to schedule. We will continue to engage and work with stakeholders as we enter into the next phase of actual drafting of the regulations and finishing the design guidelines document. And with that, I'll hand it back to Stephen.
Thanks, Christian. I'll now discuss some of the current issues with signage regulation in Edmonton. So after reviewing previous committee and council reports and holding conversations with the signs development approvals team, several issues were identified in the current zoning bylaw, including navigation concerns and wording of signage regulations. These issues are proposed to be addressed by employing the new approach for simplified sign regulations. We'd like to hear from you at the end of this presentation about issues you are experiencing with the current regulations. The following slides provide highlights on the proposed approach to signage regulation. A simplified zoning bylaw necessitates sign regulations which align with the goals of increased simplicity and a focus on improved user experience and service delivery. Some key changes highlighted in this approach include eliminating current sign schedules and embedding simplified sign regulations into each of the new land use zones, and improving the layouts of regulations by using a matrix or table-based format rather than relying mainly on text clauses. Examples of what this may look like will be discussed further in this presentation. These changes will improve legibility and reduce the need for cross-referencing different zoning bylaw sections, thereby improving the user experience. The zoning bylaw renewal provides a unique opportunity to rethink how and why we regulate certain types of development. Using this line of thinking, it's proposed that the general regulations will be developed based on the sign location on the property and the sign's level of illumination. The three proposed sign locations include projecting from building, on building, and on property. The regulations associated with these locations are further modified by the level of the sign's illumination, which include no illumination, static illumination, and active illumination. These location and illumination types will be further discussed in the following slides. So, new sign uses and regulations will be written in plain language so that sign rules and concepts will be understood by most users of the zoning bylaw. To facilitate this, existing fascia signs will be classified in the new zoning bylaw as on-building signs. Projecting signs will be known as projecting from building signs. And freestanding signs will be known as on-property signs. This distinction of sign placement and illumination levels will aid in the display of sign regulations in a proposed matrix format. So as previously mentioned, 3 levels of sign illumination are proposed. No illumination, static illumination, which includes signs that are lit externally or from within, an example of this being channel letters. And then we have active illumination, which would include digital signage and architectural illumination. Some of the examples are on the screen. So the following slide illustrates the current method of displaying sign regulations. This text-heavy display is time-consuming to read through and can be better represented by using a table. Looking to the town of High River, Alberta, their recently renewed land use bylaw features sign regulations that are more legible by including regulations by sign type. This is an approach that can be used here in Edmonton. So, this may look familiar to you. It's from the discussion paper. So here's an example of how hypothetical regulations for non-illuminated permanent signs within a zone may be displayed. So this section of the presentation highlights the proposed approach to temporary signage regulation. It's proposed that there will be minimal changes to temporary sign regulations as work has previously been completed on this subject. Temporary sign regulations will align with the sign location and illumination level regulation modifiers. Existing geospatial software will be retained. Now I'll speak to the next steps for the proposed signage approach. This approach is a first attempt at developing simplified regulations. Comments received from today's presentation, in addition to the sign design guidelines work underway, will be considered and used to improve this approach. Further public engagement opportunities will be developed and stakeholders will be notified of the activities. So we'll now take any questions you may have about the high-level approach to sign regulation. We've developed some question prompts to help get the conversation started.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Just trying to find my chat function here. Yeah, if you have any questions, and as Stephen had mentioned, we have some prompts here, some questions on the slide. But yeah, if you have any comments or questions, or you want to share any additional issues with us with the current regulations, please add them into the group chat, and then I will also do a call out for questions as well. Yeah, so there's a first one here. Is it Kelso?
Yep. I was hoping I could just talk the question out.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Excellent. Currently with the, which this is fantastic, by the way, I'll just start by saying thank you for this, and the presentation's excellent. And the discussion paper was a great starting point. As it relates to digital, which would be known as active illumination in the future, the question I have is, I think at the moment, digital is a temporary permit where it's issued for X number of years. Would it be similar in the future in terms of planning it, where a digital screen that has motion may only be permitted for a 5 or 10 year use, and then you'd have to reapply for the permit?
So this is one of the regulations that we'll be reviewing through stakeholder engagement, which will happen later in this project. It'll help inform our opinions. So therefore, we will be looking at it and just to get feedback from the industry and community stakeholders, as well as the internal staff. So we'll definitely be looking at this.
Okay. I'll have more questions, but I'll let other people join in.
Great, thank you.
Any more questions? Nothing's coming through on the chat. Does anyone out there want to ask a question? From Matt?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi there, this is Matt Abaya from High Signs. I'm the business development manager here. I guess I just have a question with regards to when digital signs are put up, how are they governed? I see many around the city that are put up without getting permits. And I'm not sure if this is a result of people not quite understanding the bylaws and how they're written, or if people are just putting them up and not knowing of the bylaws regarding them.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that through this project, we can, with the simplified approach, it'll be easier for applicants and people who want to build signs to understand these regulations. And then, yeah, so with this proposed approach, it'll be easier to educate citizens as well. Christian, if you have any
yeah, and thanks for the question, Matt. Certainly it has a lot to do with the informed piece of stakeholders and folks who either need these signs for their business or for any other reason. To answer your question, I mean, yes, every single sign on private property needs a permit. And so, you know, the hope is that in the future, how we regulate now, you know, for now, we're going to call active illumination signs. how those are regulated and what aspects of it will likely change, at least to some degree, and how at least us as administration are going to measure success for sure is that we get consistency in the outcomes and getting feedback from industry as well that I can actually understand the regulations. Because there are obviously digital signs are a bit more complicated because they do have an impact on our transportation right of ways as well. And so oftentimes, what we historically called major digital signs, depending on where they were located, they may even have to be circulated to the province, right? So I hope that kind of answers your question. Sorry, it was a bit long-winded.
Yeah, no, that definitely answers the majority of the question there. So I guess would the expectations on the city of Edmonton side be that most people are going to be understanding these, and are they going to be enforced more forcefully than they currently are, just with the simplicity of the text and the language that will be coming out?
Right. And so one of the, again, a key part of any bylaw, and while there's historically a negative connotation to it, enforceability is still an important aspect of any bylaw, and especially a zoning bylaw. So we would hope that, again, even from our enforcement arm standpoint, that the decisions made in terms of when and how we enforce are consistent across the board. That would be an indicator of success in my mind.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have another one. Okay, Kelso?
Thank you again. Just quick by way of background, Tina Kendrick is on the call. She's the executive director for the Alberta Sign Association, and I'm the president, or the current president. We recently worked with the city of Edmonton and their e-services department, Jason Duerksen, and assisted with helping get the permanent sign permitting application online. So that was launched on October 13th, and it's up and running, which we've seen some great success from it in reducing our overall wait times. When we were reviewing this at a stakeholder level and trying to get engagement from our membership, it's a little bit sporadic and all over the map, but there's challenges inside the city. And I'll give just a few examples. One would be the Brewery District, which is a historical area. And so there's other levels of approval or committee reviews that may happen for a historical area versus, say, the Strathcona area, where it's a little bit more like the sign standards in Banff. And when you download the sign standards from Old Strathcona, it follows the Banff bylaws, or the Banff, I guess, the style and feel. Oddly enough, I own the Banff Sign Company, so we actually set the rules and regulations with the town of Banff as well, which is focusing more on limiting light pollution, which there's no illumination allowed, and blending into its environment more so than it is to stand out. I guess the challenge that we had, and part of the feedback that I guess I'll provide, was it didn't really provide an alert when you're providing or applying for a permit in a certain district that would give you kind of a heads up, like a red flag that says you're in a historical area. It's going to go through additional points of improvement. And I'm wondering how you might categorize that, or you don't have to answer now, but just to have it on your radar to be simplified, as static versus active, or maybe, for instance, right off the bat, you would know through your table matrix that there's no digital or what we call active illumination in Old Strathcona. Do you, or have you thought about how to handle certain areas of the city with respect to that?
That's a really good point, and that's feedback we definitely need to hear, because it's things that we may not have considered at the time of writing the discussion paper. Certainly, there are things we are capable of dealing with in the scope of this project with the zoning bylaw, in terms of changes to how we review heritage areas, for example. That's a little bit out of scope of this project. However, certainly we agree and we'll take back that it would be helpful to know that I'm in a heritage area, by the way, and it may have to go through some additional hoops to be able to get an approval. That's something we'll take back and try to implement and make sure that it's in that chart for you.
Appreciate the feedback. And I've reached out to almost everybody on this chat and added on LinkedIn. And so it's more from a volunteer perspective from our not-for-profit association, which these are things that we're all helping build on to improve all of the systems as a whole. So feel free to reach out to the Alberta Sign Association, and we've got a wealth of knowledge through all of our members as well.
Oh, we definitely will. Thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry, I know I'm the moderator of the session, but I also just wanted to mention that Jason Dirksen is also one of the project sponsors for our technology piece. So he's working also very closely with us on improving that technology and how our bylaw interacts with, you know, statutory plans and things like that with our mapping. So I just want to give you a heads up that Jason is a project sponsor of this.
Excellent. And he and his team and Laura Skokel, everybody's been amazing to work with. So we really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you. And is it Kenan? Kenan? Do you have a couple? You said you have a couple comments or questions? So I could read this. First off, it's great to see that the city is moving in the direction of more graphics and images and tables as opposed to text-heavy bylaws. This is great. The images in the discussion paper look great. That's a good thing. Yep. So that is definitely not only for signs, but for other parts of our bylaw. We want to do as many images and tables and being able to navigate through the bylaw really easily. So it's a matter through our technology, but also just the way we organize the bylaw as well. And one thing we're trying to do less of is having to reference a whole bunch of other different sections, and that most of the regulations will be in one zone. Yeah, so if you want to ask your question, I'm sorry if I'm not sure if it's Kenan or Keenan. You're welcome to speak your question as well. Okay, currently there are many bylaws that have a particular purpose that purpose is not stated. Will this
sorry, I'll
be
just
included?
try and, speak the question because it's
okay.
Easier
we can hear you now.
Here. But yeah, so currently sometimes we'll apply for, I'll just tell everyone who I am real quick. I'm just an employee with Cameron Developments, and we do a lot of sign application permits or permit applications for signs and buildings. And sometimes, oh, sorry. Anyways, and sometimes the, you guys can hear me fine? Yeah, sometimes we'll apply for a variance on something because, you know, we're going against a particular bylaw, but not necessarily against the purpose of the bylaw. An example of this would be one of our sites in Manning. We were applying for we were trying to put in a small monument sign that shouldn't have needed a permit, but there was a regulation put in there to allow for wayfinding signs and monument signs, but because our monument sign didn't match a particular requirement for the wayfinding sign, it ended up meaning that we needed a permit. And it was sort of like, you know, we had to go through this whole process, and in the end didn't end up actually having to get a permit. But the long story short is simply that sometimes the reason for a particular bylaw is not in there, and I think the city ends up saying like, well, we're going to follow this exact regulation, even though either a variance is being applied for because, you know, it's not going against the purpose of the bylaw. Does that make any sense? I feel like I was getting kind of lost there.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. And I think your question spans way beyond signs. I think it's just it's a question that can potentially apply to this whole project. One of the certain weaknesses is in a previous life, I was a development officer, and there were there are certain regulations that are within the bylaw that I have no choice but to read at face value because the report that went to council, either I can't find it or I didn't write it, so I'm not really sure what the justification was for any specific way a regulation was drafted. So that's feedback we'll take back, because in my mind, one thing that might, a feature, for example, that might be helpful for the zoning bylaw is to link directly to those reports as we amend in the future, that provide rationale and justification for any specific regulation, and provide some intent. That I think that's something we've actually discussed in the past, Livia, as a team, about how we justify what and how we regulate.
Yeah. Yeah, there's on our Engage Edmonton website, there's a document called the Philosophy of the New Zoning Bylaw. And one of the aspects of this new zoning bylaw is to ensure we have purposeful regulations, so that there's a purpose. And we're also creating a decision-making framework as well to help us decide, should this be regulated or not? And to what degree should it be regulated? So we're taking a more strategic approach as we're putting regulations into the zoning bylaw, but yeah, I hear you, is that we want to make sure that they're purposeful, and that people have a really like a clear line of sight to why that's being regulated and why that regulation's in there. I hope that answered your question. So I'm going to just do, there's no more, I believe there's no more questions on the.
I had one
Oh,
more.
you have another question? Yep, go ahead.
I snuck in just above Keenan. And so I guess I'll just again speak on behalf of the Alberta Sign Association. I'm the general manager of High Signs, which Matt was on here as well, our business development officer. And I understand Keenan's question there, as well as we do work for Cameron Developments as well. I think for the most part, this is a 90% small business discussion and 10% large mega structures, if you will. And so we're almost expected to have an intricate knowledge when we're trying to do, and I'll give an example, the variance we applied for the South Edmonton Common pylon signs on behalf of Cameron Developments. It was taller than normal. So a 34-foot tall sign structure became 38 feet and it was approved. And so what we're really trying to avoid, I guess, is, and I like the idea of simplifying it, is that for the 80% of our member associations, their business size is 1 to 9 employees. And so while speaking with Brenda Norman about a particular sign application that we are approving for, she had mentioned with the historical area of the brewery district, it should be up to us to know that that's a historical area. And I did mention to her, I said, I could agree with that at the level of potentially High Signs, which is one of the larger manufacturing companies in Edmonton. But for the small mom and pop shops, they don't have the power or the horsepower behind the personnel behind their organization to sift through all the paperwork. And I guess that's what you have in mind already. So I just wanted to keep that in mind, that majority of our stakeholders, 90% are under 10 employees for the city of Edmonton as it relates to sign installers, manufacturers. And from our, I guess, private industry view, majority, I would say 95% of the sign permit applications are done by the sign company and not the sign client or the owner. Cameron is a rare exception where they do their own sign permits, but majority of the sign companies apply on behalf of the client. So just feedback.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we appreciate that. Was there any questions, comments, thoughts, any want to share with us, any potential technological enhancements?
I just have one quick comment, I guess. You on your slide, support for this proposed approach. I just wanted to say our aspirations with the Alberta Sign Association is definitely to work together. And I apologize for taking over and being all about the ASA, but we really do work closely with the City of Edmonton and ensuring that we are doing things with our members together and appropriately and doing it safely for everybody involved. We would love to also be able to communicate, especially with your compliance officers who are going out there, viewing the signs, looking at them. What would work best for you guys in that sense? I know on our end, we are creating, you know, like maybe something like a postcard so that your compliance officers can hand that out, because we do want to support non-members and members that are out there in what you guys are doing and explaining it, you know, and simplifying how signage is, because it is not a simple process. So my question is, and aspiration really with the ASA, is how can we share that line of communication to, let's say, a company that may have questions and might not necessarily be answered by the city of Edmonton, but how the ASA can help in that sense. Or maybe you need to take that back and kind of think on how we can work together on that.
Could I just get some clarity? Was that more about promoting the Alberta Signs Association, or more the promotion of the zoning bylaw renewal and how you know, the sign industry members could get involved?
Yeah, so I would like to say both, but on the flip side, I also like to say I have received calls from compliance officers in the past, just stating that there's maybe some miscommunication on what is involved in the permitting, what's involved in the engineering, involved in the whole concept altogether. So they also know that the Alberta Sign Association can help them, whether they're members or non-members who want to be proactive so that we can work together. So I'm just wondering really what we can do to do that together. If you guys have something that you would like to see that we can put out there, because like Kelso mentioned, we do have many people that we can reach out to. So whether that's something, you know, like this example, we sent out multiple emails about this session and want to make sure that people do have their say. So if there is something else that can be put out there, whether it's, you know, communication through you know, email or anything else, we would really like to be able to help that. And then also the other side is to promote the ASA, because we are here to definitely work with the city of Edmonton.
Yep. Yeah, and maybe this is something that we should take offline and talk a little bit further, but I know as a zoning bylaw renewal initiative, we have been and will continue to be reaching out to our enforcement, because we have various different enforcement teams here at the city. So making sure that we're working with them and they're fully understanding the initiative. But I'm also hearing from you just kind of general education to companies, to individuals that are in the business of putting up signs. So education and figuring out where the gaps are as part of the new zoning bylaw and the permitting processes is part of our implementation. So it's something definitely we need to look in. But Tina, we will. I know Christian and Stephen will be reaching out to you, and let's put that as an agenda item to talk about that further.
Definitely.
Absolutely. We would love to help fill in that gap. Thank you.
Yep. Sorry, I have children at home.
Don't apologize for children. Maybe I'll speak briefly while I am going to interject, sorry, but this is a technological advancement. While we were talking with Jason Durickson, it does have the capability to narrow down the zone in particular. So I put our address in and it did come up with Cornet Industrial Zone, which is where High Signs is located. And so there's an opportunity there to have an immediate notification and red flags come up on the screen when you're applying for a permit in we'll call it a challenging area. And so Jason did say that that's something that could be built in the future. I don't believe that we built it in at the moment, but the capability is there. And I think we should certainly leverage it if it's easy to access that technology.
Absolutely. Jason, as you mentioned, he's excellent to work with, and he's always trying his best to implement new ideas, especially if they're going to benefit everyone. There's a huge piece to this renewal and its implementation and technology. And so certainly this is feedback we're going to take back, and I'll make sure it's shared with our technology lead and our sponsor, Jason. Yeah, and again, we want this experience to be, not only the end experience, but the journey of getting there, to be together. And so going back to Tina's point, like again, I'd mentioned the other half of me deals with the urban design, and so I mentioned briefly on the design guidelines, where I really need ASA's help is to help make sure get the word out to all of your people to know that, hey, there's a draft of this thing coming out, and it might affect your work, and we need feedback. We understand, right now with the pandemic and COVID, it's been really difficult to get meaningful feedback because everyone's got their own problems to deal with. But this only works if we get feedback from the people who are going to be most affected by it. So that's where I can see ASA definitely helping us a lot.
Appreciate that.
And just further to that point on technological enhancements, I'd just like to take this opportunity to plug some of the work that the Zoning Bylaw Renewal team is currently working on with the technology project. So we've currently been reaching out to customers, land developers, sign industries, just to hear their information on experiences with accessing both signage regulations and just other general information. So if you'd be interested in providing your feedback on issues or aspirations that you'd like to see with new technology to display the zoning bylaw, I'd be happy to hear it. We could have a customer interview. Just let me know at the end of this presentation. Thanks.
Hi, sorry, I'm back. Children emergency going on in the living room. We are at 2:44 here, so we still have another 15 minutes. So if there's any other questions or discussion, any thoughts, anything we need to think about, any risks, any issues that might come up?
I think I'm going to save everything else for offline discussions because I don't want to take up everybody's time. And of course, I could speak at length on this all day, and I really appreciate you guys, everybody that's doing the work in this. And I know that it's a long lead time to get to 2022, but the time creeps up on us quickly. And I was working with Jason for over a year on online sign permitting applications. Then it just happens, and it changes the way all of us do business. So thank you for that.
I'll just add here on our slide right now are ways you can get involved. So our discussion papers are posted on the Engage Edmonton platform. We also have a Zoning Bylaw Renewal website. So that's Zoning Bylaw Renewal, edmonton.ca. On that website, you can subscribe to sign up to get newsletter or information emails from us. We also have a feedback form. If you have any thoughts, you can put some feedback on there. And then we have a general zoning bylaw renewal email as well. But as mentioned, our third batch of papers are launched on the Engage Edmonton platform right now, and that includes the signs discussion paper. We also have, for the associations that are here today, we also have a communications advisor which can also help with any communications for any of your newsletters or anything like that. That if you need some assistance, we can provide that support as well. So thank you definitely for supporting this. We'll just do another call out for any questions. So there was a question about, can we send you that slide? We definitely can. We also are recording this session, which we'll be posting as well on our Engage Edmonton platform. So we can let you know when this is posted, so you can share this with your membership. And I just want to make sure, Jenny, that you're getting some of the content on here with the email address. Okay, great. Thanks, Jenny. I'll just do one more call out. Well, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate you attending this session. As it was mentioned in the presentation, we'll have a number of upcoming opportunities to be engaged on this. And we'll reach out to the Alberta Sign Association as well. And yeah, thank you. Have a very good afternoon. And thank you for participating.